Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the May 4th Lunchtime Hot Topics. This is Brad Neuenswander. I'm running solo today until about 15-20 minutes, and then Jay Scott's going to join us. Before we get started, though, I just want to say Happy Educators Week, Teacher Appreciation. Yesterday evening, got to spend some time at a high school academic awards banquet, and I tell you what, the teachers, they're just amazing. It's great to get around them and everything that they do to try and recognize and encourage kids. So it was a fun evening. So I hope back home you're doing everything you can to let them know how much they're appreciated and how much you're appreciated. So anyway, jumping into today's hot topics, we just have a few updates. Again, some of these may be repeats, but takes 4 or 5 times to hear some things to get it to really sink in, but just kind of give you an update on where we're at. We're just a little bit of a update on where we are with the accreditation model. Some things have happened since the last time we visited. Again, some updates on civic engagement, kindergarten readiness, the Kansas Learning Network, just an update on what we're have in motion for that. Individual plans of study, Jay Scott will be in. Again, just to briefly give you some updates on what we're doing there. Then I've just got some things to share with you at the end. Again, this with postcards that the board has used to communicate. We put those on some PowerPoint slides. You'll be able to download this PowerPoint with those postcards on it, just something that may help you as you're communicating with your patrons locally. So as far as an accreditation update, we've been working on a new model for 3 to 4 years now. Again, two of the major components of the new accreditation model is, number one, looking at accrediting districts or systems as opposed to individual schools, which is what we had for, since 1992. And that's a big shift in thinking, but we're trying to align the model to what we believe most school districts are already moving to. The other big change is accreditation is going to be more about following a process over a period of time. The recommendation is we look at a 5-year cycle as opposed to the current QPA, which is an annual event. And it was basically just based off of test scores. So those are probably the two biggest shifts in the new model. There's other components, but those are the two major shifts. The state board, kind of for a timeline, and they met on April 20th. They had a retreat. We had, at that time, 5 school districts came and visited with the board and presented. We had Kansas City, Olathe, Wichita, Buhler, Derby, Holcomb. They came and visited and shared with the board some of the work they're already doing around the rubrics, how they're looking at setting their goals, how they've are working more as a pre-K through 12 system as opposed to individual siloed buildings. So had a really good day. They did a fantastic job. Board had a lot of good questions. In May, on May 17th, the board will receive, it'll be a receive item based on the recommendations from the Accreditation Advisory Council. They'll spend about an hour and a half going into some details of the components. Our goal with the timeline is then the board would take action on a new model in June. That would make next year, the 16-17 school year, kind of what we've been phrasing as the 0 year or a transition year, when we start moving forward with the new model. And we're anticipating that districts will be at all different phases throughout the model. Some will be just starting out with phase 1, very beginning, to where we have some districts that are most likely in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th year, based on the 5 different phases. So if this timeline works out and the state board takes some action in June, then what we would do is there would not be, and again, this is all based on board's action, we would then basically unplug the QPA quarterly, or the collection that's typically done in June. Now, when I say unplug, I know that's a technical IT term, but basically there would not be, principals, building leaders would not go in this summer and do the QPA annual report. Again, as of now, they still would, because that's still what we're living under, but hopefully if the board, if the timeline works out, our goal is to not have that event happen this summer. In place of that, the advisory council is recommending that we replace that with a survey. And this would just go to the superintendents. And the survey would just kind of be a readiness survey, 1 per district. And I'll kind of share with you the goals of that. We have been sending it out to school districts over a 6-week period. Just once a week, we've been sending out just little snippets about what the process looks like, in order for, we don't imagine this survey taking more 10-15 minutes, but it's just to, the whole purpose is to kind of get districts thinking about where they would enter into the process. Have they already looked at rubrics? Have they gone through that initial analysis of where they're at in the district? Have they set goals? It will also assist our agency in figuring out how many districts will be entering in at certain phases. And it'll also allow us to get our arms around what types of topics, support we're going to need to be providing as far as professional learning over the next year to districts as we phase into the new model. If you have any questions or want any supports or any information about the new accreditation model, here's the people you can reach out to. Again, you can always give me a call too, but Kelly Slayton, Ann Yates, Scott Myers, and Bill Bagshaw. Just a quick little update on civic engagement. Again, that's one of the board added that to the definition of a successful high school graduate. This is the definition that the board approved, that individuals are sharing their skills and knowledge through actions intended to improve their communities, the states, the nation, the world, including themselves. It is part, again, of the results part of the accreditation model. When we're talking about that successful high school graduate. So again, in civic engagement, the board added that because when we did our tour, Randy and I and the board a year ago, close to 30 tours across the state. That was one of the largest things that people said that successful young Kansans should have. So the board listened to the field and added that. This here, some of you might find it familiar, others it might be new, but we're working with, partnering with a group out of KU called the Research Collaboration. They've done a lot of work around designing how do you teach things like curiosity, networking, empathy. They've got lesson plans and templates and stuff designed to help teach those interpersonal, intrapersonal, and cognitive skills. Again, all of these aligned perfectly with what Kansan said we want in our young adults, actually all of us. But a lot of it aligns perfectly with the work around civic engagement and how students can learn conflict management, initiative, empathy. All of that aligns well within the civic engagement. We'll be providing more examples of how these things fit into civic engagement, individual plans of study. So this will be a resource as we move forward. You'll be wanting to look for this. I guess you can call it a color wheel. It'll be more recognized as we move forward, but some just examples of how civic engagement, how you can use those in lesson plans and throughout, with your students. You're invited to learn more about the civic engagement. They'll be discussing it in more detail at the May 17th board meeting. It'll be on the agenda for the June 14th Impact Institute in Emporia. They'll be on at the 15th. Our staff in Garden City. The 16th in Wichita. We'll be sending out more information on those. And then the July 6th and 7th Impact Institute at Fort Hays. If you want more detailed information, just go to our website. Just under civic engagement, you can find more information on that. As far as assessments, as of yesterday, word is we were close to 96 to 98% of our students had already completed all of the assessments. So you did a great job on that this year. I just wanted to give you an update. On May 10th, we're going to be bringing back in an advisory council that has been guiding us over the last few years around our state assessments. That's the College and Career Ready Assessment Advisory Council, or for short, CRAC. But we will be, yeah, I know, I'm not allowed to come up with names of advisory committees anymore after this one. But regardless, they are coming back. And as a result of ESSA, the state board's new vision, where we're wanting to head with the new accreditation model and where does academic performance and specifically the state assessments fit into that, we're going to have a good discussion that morning. And kind of what we're looking at is, I hope you can see the mouse on the screen. Can they, Nick? All right. With ESSA and even state law, we're required to have a summative assessment. That's an end of the year. It's used as just a snapshot. ESSA, even though they require that we continue to give the assessment at grades 3 through 8 and once in high school, we get to design how we want to use the results of that. But this is the requirement, the summative assessment. We're going to have a discussion with the crack committee on May 10th that you guys, I got a couple IT guys in here that think that's funny, but we're going to have a discussion about the summative assessment. Do we want to continue to have it adaptive? Can we reduce the size of it to where it's just a two-part test? Do we want to remove the performance items out of the summative and make those maybe part of an interim that you could use throughout the year, but take it out of the summative? Our goal is to put more focus on interims and formatives that are available to school districts, not required but available, that give you more detailed information about instruction, about students, where they're at throughout the year, but all of them would align to the state standards. Some of them could even be predictable about how a kid might do on the summative. So we're going to have a lot of discussion about having more of a balanced assessment system in the state, with the ultimate goal to help inform instruction, provide more timely what teachers need, and at the same time could possibly replace at the local level school districts having to spend thousands to millions of dollars on other assessments when we can provide all of these free to schools. So this is what the crack committee will be discussing on May 10th. Just a quick update on kindergarten readiness. Again, that was set as one of the state board's outcomes that they want to measure and look at in Kansas. We have an advisory group that's comprised of agencies outside of KSDE. We've got some kindergarten teachers on that advisory group. They've been meeting since January. We anticipate that in the fall of 2016, we will roll out the developmental, which means we're in the process of developing it, a screening tool. We're going to look, we've got several school districts that have already volunteered. They would like to pilot that screening tool. If your district's interested, shoot me an email. I'll get it to the people that will be leading that, Tammy Mitchell and Colleen Riley. But once this tool is piloted in 2016, then we'll have it a statewide rollout in 2017. Now that doesn't mean everybody has to use it. If you already have a good quality one, that's great, but this is one that we want to provide for all school districts to be able to use if they don't have one yet. The screener basically is going to collect information on language and literacy, cognition, general knowledge, physical well-being, motor development, socio-emotional. There will also be some questions that you'll be able to ask the parents, the families, the caregivers about what was the child's experience before kindergarten. Were they involved in early childhood programs? It's just the main thing about this tool is it is not an assessment or a tool, a pass-fail of whether or not a student should enter kindergarten. If a kid meets the age requirements, we want to be providing them services. This is just a screener to find out, are they ready for kindergarten? And if not, in what areas are they going to need supports? It's not that if the kid doesn't pass it or if they're not ready, that we send them home. They need to be receiving services We just need to know what % of our kids are showing up prepared, and if not, in what areas are they lacking. So again, we'll be looking for school districts that want to pilot the development of this screening tool. We're working with an organization right now that they are developing it. They want to get it out into some schools during the developmental phase, and there will be more information to follow on that. As far as the Kansas Learning Network, we have been working with priority and focus schools since 2012, but with ESSA, and it was also our plan, so it's timely when we were under the waiver, that we will be identifying a new cohort group for the 16-17 school year. So this upcoming year, we'll be using 2015 and 16 data from assessments, but more importantly, we will be using other measures that we have longitudinal. We will be weighting in other factors like poverty, English language learners, special ed populations, the mobility of students. So there's several other factors that we will be weighing in to that calculation, so we're truly identifying schools that need support, actually based more on their risk factors that are having effects on academic achievement. But we have an advisory committee that we've been working with, made up predominantly of our school districts that currently have priority schools. Because when you think about it, under the waiver, we were identifying 5% priority and 10% of Title I schools as focus for a total of 15% or 99 schools. Under ESSA, that's going to be just 5%, and they'll be called comprehensive support. So we're going to focus more probably on a population of around 30 buildings, but we have an advisory group that's looking at the data, looking at options of what that looks like. We will rerun all of that once we have 2017 data. We will add that into it because ESSA full implementation is the 17-18 school year. So next year, we will be working with those districts that have that initial group of schools, but we'll rerun it again. They'll be doing some initial needs assessments in the fall of 2016, but full implementation in 17-18. So more to follow on that. Actually, this advisory group is meeting again next week, where they'll start really looking at options that we want to move forward. Individual plans of study, I have the great Jay Scott here joining me. I'm going to let him drive the mouse.
Oh gosh.
And
I think I can do that.
we're going to walk through just a few slides, quick update on individual plans of study.
Or just roll it or click it.
Dr. Scott?
Well, thank you, Dr. Neuenswander. I'm in the presence of greatness, not my own, of Brad Neuenswander. So any chance I have to spend time with Brad, I jump at that, even though he's not very good at naming committees. So in the essence of time, good afternoon, everybody. Talking about individual plans of study. We've been doing a lot of talking about it recently. We'll show you a slide on that in a second, but maybe I'll just start with that. We've been doing IPS workshops across the state. We have 3 left, and during that time, I think we're going to end up with 9 different workshops across the state this spring. We started in April. We'll finish up here mid-May. But we have been in front of no less than 100 people at each of those workshops, lots of principals and counselors. So it's been great to see the turnout for those workshops, and hopefully we're providing some professional learning around individual plans of study that you all can use back in your schools. One of the topics that we're discussing at the workshops is the state preferred vendor list for individual plans of study. Many of our schools are already using a vendor for individual plans of study, like Career Cruising or the Kansas Career Pipeline, Naviance. We decided that we needed to, as the board made it a focus of schools that, one of our high student success outcomes in the state of Kansas is that every student beginning in the middle grades will develop and revisit and revise and create an individual plan of study. So with that endorsement from the board, we started planning how we could help schools implement these for all students beginning in the middle grades. And one of the aspects that we're taking on is creating a state preferred vendor list. The purpose of that list is to provide schools that aren't currently using a vendor, create basically an option for those schools for an individual plan of study software program. Also for those schools who are already paying a vendor for individual plans of study, that if that vendor makes it on the state preferred vendor list, then we, by making it on that list, they would lower their price for existing service in the state of Kansas. So we're really hoping to help schools with that through the state preferred vendor list. Currently, where we are in creating that list, we have received all the vendor proposals from the RFP. We're asking 2 questions of those 4 vendors. Can the vendor deliver on all 18 components? We call that the Cadillac version of an individual plan of study software system. Can the vendor deliver on all 18 components by the beginning of this next school year? And then also, can the vendor deliver all those components at a reasonable per student cost to all schools, regardless of your school size? So that's currently the questions we're vetting the vendors by. Once we've fully vetted those, we're going to make a recommendation to the State Board of Education, hopefully at the May meeting. If not at the May meeting, it would definitely be at the June meeting. But hopefully by the May meeting, we can get in front of the State Board and make our recommendation as a committee as far as who should be on the state preferred vendor list for individual plans of study. So once the preferred vendor list is out, then schools, and if you're wanting to move to a state preferred vendor list, we know that possibly at the latest it would be mid-June when we would have that list out. We know that's too late for many schools to take action and switch to a vendor for the 16-17 school year. So what we're doing is, and this is to help the entire state, if you as a school district want to switch to a state preferred individual plan of study software vendor, we are prepared to pay the startup costs for schools that want to switch to a state preferred IPS vendor. And we're prepared to pay the startup costs not only for this next school year, 16-17, but also prior to the 17-18 school year. It's just a way to help schools get started if they want to use a state preferred vendor. So this is a diagram that shows basically the possibilities for schools as far as will the state pay for startup costs. And before I get into this, I want to make sure everybody realizes you don't have to pay for an individual plan of study vendor. We've got a lot of school districts that have created their own systems that work best for them and their students. And so by all means, kudos to those schools and press on. There is no cost to implementing individual plans of study for all students as far as a required cost. This can be done at the local level. But if you want to move to a state preferred vendor, and they do have really a good product, these are the different instances where the state will pay for startup costs. If you're currently not using a vendor and you select a preferred vendor, then the state would pay the startup costs. If you select a non-preferred vendor, then the school would be responsible for those costs. If you're currently using a non-preferred vendor and you select a preferred vendor, then we would pay the startup costs. If you select a different non-preferred vendor, and then again the school would incur the cost for startup costs for switching. If you're currently using a state preferred vendor, and again we don't know that, but once we have that out, we know there'll be some schools probably that are in this boat, but you're currently using a preferred vendor. If you choose to select a different vendor, a different state preferred vendor, the school would incur those costs, as well as if you went to a non-preferred vendor, then again the school would pay the startup costs. We get a lot of questions about the situations when the state would pay startup costs, so we put this diagram together. If you have questions, please feel free to call me or Kathleen Mercer, who's a joint employee with KSDE and KBOR. She's really heading this up. Did you have anything on that?
Nope.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Jay. The last thing I had, I just want to share these with you, and I know many of you out there are already using these, but the state board and Randy, Dr. Watson, they've been trying to make concerted efforts to really communicate across the state as well as across the street to the legislature where the state board's wanting to head. This is a postcard that they did just to get people familiar with who they are and what their vision is, that Kansas will lead the world in the success of each student. We took the cards and put them on some PowerPoint slides. Hopefully this could just be another resource when you're communicating with your site councils, local chamber, your teachers, your school board. These are just them in PowerPoint form. And again, these will be posted on my webpage. But this card here kind of talks about, the tours that we went across the state and just a few highlights of what people said that they wanted. So it's just a good conversation starter to get people like, so why are we changing? How did they come up with this new vision? So this is just a slide that kind of just briefly talks about the board's efforts and why. This slide here talks about Kansans can invest, just trying to really highlight what it is that we're wanting to do in this state and what was it that over 2,000 people across the state told us that they wanted the board to do. Focusing on quality preschool and all-day kindergarten, changing the school culture, tech ed or a 2-year college is just as much important as a 4-year college. So anyway, highlighting the work of counselors, social workers, career paths, individual plans of study. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but again, just a good slide of just having conversations with your staff about what did Kansans say that they wanted us to focus on. This next slide is really defining success. So we took The old definition of college and career ready that the board had approved a little over 2 years ago, and they changed it to a successful Kansas high school graduate, has the academic, cognitive, technical, employability, and they added civic engagement. And they also added on this slide, and here's how the state is going to measure success, how the state board will. Now, you'll have multiple local indicators, like what the number of students completing career pathways, industry recognized certifications, involved in extracurricular activities. So there's multiple local indicators, but this is just a slide that you can share with them what the state board's focusing on. This is another slide that talks about a little more detailed of why did the board choose kindergarten readiness. A little data behind that supports that, kind of what Kansas said that they wanted, supported by a little bit of data. So this is just a good slide to have those kind of conversations locally. This one here, just like Jay was talking about, what is the importance behind an individual plan of study? Why did the state board select that? Why did so many people across Kansas say that was that important? And actually, when Randy and I last fall went back out on what we called the reunion tour and shared the results of the initial tour back out across the state, individual plans of study was the #1 response that people said, yes, you heard us right. We need to move forward for all kids an individual plan of study focused on their career interest. So again, the board put it in as part of one of their state outcomes. This is just a good slide for when you're talking with parents about, well, what do you mean an individual plan of study? This would be a good slide to have that conversation with them, just kind of at a surface level. High school graduation rates, again, some good data. This is the data that you're familiar with. We've shared out of the Georgetown Center on Education and Workforce. By 2020, 71% of jobs in Kansas are going to require some post-secondary. The great news is that's 6 percentage points higher than the national average, which is good for Kansas. But not all of them are a bachelor's degree. About 36% of those jobs, about 35% will need a certificate or an associate. So again, just another good slide. We have, as of 14-15, about almost 86% of our students graduate. That's pretty high in the nation, but it's not the highest. We want to lead the world in it. We got to start with the nation, and then we're going after other countries on that. But again, just another good slide for you to start the conversation back locally. Post-secondary completion attendance, just another slide just to talk about, the labor market. Why is it important? Why do we need to get more kids on to post-secondary completion and attendance? And then social-emotional growth. Again, that was another input from across the state that Kansans told us that was extremely important, but it should be measured locally. So we will be working, or we are working on how do you teach those skills? How do you measure those skills? So that's some of the work that we, Kent Reed, Jay Scott, Don Gifford, some of that group's been working on. Brittany Crabtree, that will be, so look for that in the future. But again, just another slide that can help you have those conversations back at home. With that, that's pretty much our update today. Again, if you have any questions, future topics, email those to lunchtime@ksde.org. And I believe that we have one more scheduled on the 18th, and that'll be the last one for this year. We don't plan on doing these during the summer, but again, any questions, thoughts, send them to Lunchtime Hot Topics. That way we know what needs to be responded to. Again, we will have this posted out on my website under Lunchtime Hot Topics, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you.